today and your interest, your time for spending here and discussing with us this important issue about energy efficiency cooling in the cooling sector. I am Anderson Alves from UNDP. I coordinate the work for the Montreal Protocol in the Asia Pacific region, also working with chemicals and waste related issues. And well, the purpose of this side event is to discuss a little bit an important work that we started in 2017 when the KSEP, the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, was founded. So there was this first call of ideas for projects that could substantiate energy efficiency under the Kigali Amendment implementation. And at that time, India was one of the countries that pioneered the development of a national cooling plan. So UNDP proposed to KSEP, that was an idea very well accepted by the donors. And in the end, we helped 12 countries around the globe to develop their own cooling plan. So today we wanted to share with you some of the main findings and results. Some of the main findings and results of this work that had been completed between 2020 and 2021. You are going to notice somewhere in the walls and also in the table, there is a QR code. This QR code, if you scan, is going to lead you to UNDP Spark Blue page. This is our knowledge management platform where we are going to upload the presentations today. We are going also to upload the copies of the cooling plans that are public and accessible. And this could also be the means where you can contact us, post your questions, or reach specialists in the area if you want to further discuss this subject beyond the boundaries of these walls here today. So with us here today, we have Ms. Xiaofeng Zhou. She's a director of the Montreal Protocol Chemicals and Waste Unit from the Central Bureau for Policy and Program Support of UNDP. I would like also to welcome, join virtually, Ms. Dima May Ray Madi. She is a UNDP consultant on finance, and she will explain to us a little bit potential financial schemes and mechanisms that we can use to deploy efficient cooling projects and strategies. We also have Ms. Lara Haider. She is a National Ozone Office Assistant and the coordinator of the project for the development of cooling plans of the National Ozone Unit of Lebanon. Here in person, I also have the engineer Idris Abdullah, that from the National Ozone Office of Nigeria, that kindly agreed to also present a little bit the experiences of Nigeria in developing their cooling plan. I also have Mr. Rifa Wadwood, that is also National Ozone Officer of the government of Sri Lanka from the Ministry of Environment. Casper Kofod Hansen, that is the regional coordinator of the Montreal Protocol Unit for Latin America and Caribbean of UNDP. And finally, but not least, the engineer, Professor Roberto Peixoto, we all know very well from TIAP. He was the lead international expert that provided guidance and also technical peer review of great part of the cooling plans that were developed between UNDP and the countries that you see here today. So I will pass the floor to Xiaofeng Zhou. She will deliver us some opening remarks.
Thank you, Anderson. Dear distinguished delegates, participants, our colleagues, panelists, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to meet all of you in Bangkok this week. And thanks very much for your participation in this side event. The purpose of this side event is to share the findings on the development of the national cooling plans in 12 countries that were supported by the KSAP and UNDP in past few years. And most of these cooling plans has been published by the concerned governments and contains significant level of information on the status, analysis, prediction, and recommendations about the needed actions in the cooling sector to align with the objective of the climate action and Kigali Amendment. The development of these cooling plans has been greatly supported by the national ozone units who made tremendous efforts to bring together the relevant stakeholders and institutions of the country. And taking this opportunity, I would like to express our deep appreciation to the colleagues here and who has been contributed to the development of the cooling plans. And my colleague Anderson, will present a summary of these cooling plans, the findings, and we hope those findings are useful information for the community of the Montreal Protocol and other relevant institutions to consider a broader and inclusive approach that can maximize impact of the refrigeration transition and energy saving in a coordinated manner. And this included synergies in the policy framework and also programs. I also would like to take the opportunity here to share some views from our perspective on this matter. First of all, and the cooling plans told us very clearly how important this cooling sector is for the sustainable development and climate change. In many countries, the cooling sector is on top of all of other sectors in terms of emissions of greenhouse gas. And for example, in the case of Lebanon, cooling sector consumes 26% of the electricity consumption in the country. And we know in some countries in the Middle East, this ratio is even higher. The estimation also indicated the potential high growth of the cooling demands over future 30 years in developing countries such as in Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. This analysis told us that the cooling sector should be the priority in many countries if we are going to address the climate issue in line with the Paris Agreement. The unit of the Montreal Protocol in all of the countries has the richest experience and expertise in the cooling sector. Such expertise could be able to play a vital role to delivering the sustainable cooling solutions, including the refrigerant transition and energy efficiency. Second, many countries still don't have the maps in place or lack of the capacity to implement the maps effectively. The capacity building in this regard is much needed. And considering those numbers of the cooling units globally, even moderate level of the maps, if implemented by all of the countries, would lead to the huge impact. So it is necessary to consider a coordinated time frame on the update of the maps and HFC phase down. In such a way, we can save the cost of the whole society for the transition towards the sustainable cooling in the long run. Third, many technologies in the cooling sector has evolved over time and will play the critical role in the broader approach of energy transition. For example, the heat pump can help reduce the use of the fossil fuel for heating applications in integrated solutions. And highly efficient cooling technology coupled with renewable energy could potentially deliver the system solution that are carbon neutral, even in the energy incentive facilities such as hospitals, hotels, supermarket, cold storage. Those are kind of facilities really use a lot of energy. And in some cases, it can save up to the 90% of energy for cooling of the buildings and greatly, for example, district cooling, those solutions, and also could greatly reduce the need for refrigerant that, are harmful for the climate. And we also recognize the difference of the approach between refrigerant transition and energy efficiency program. In terms of energy efficiency program, the business model is very important to attract the investment from private sector, also from public, sectors. There is a need to explore the suited model for the country, given the local circumstances. There is opportunity to generate this business model through the introduction of the highly efficient and low GWP technologies. For example, in the HFC investment project UNDP implemented for Bangladesh and Mexico in the domestic refrigeration sector, we achieved from 15% to 40% of energy saving in the new models after the conversion. And KSAP contribute additional resources for the design of the models on top of those funds provided by the Multilateral Fund. This is a perfect example of the good synergy between energy efficiency and refrigerant transition, and was very well welcomed by the industry and countries. So to address the need of the investment, today we also invite the financial expert to present some models of energy efficiency, for your consideration. Finally, I would like to say that energy transition and efficiency are one of the three main objectives of UNDP in our new strategic plan in the period of 2022 to 2025. We are aiming to build the partnerships at national level, regional level, and also global level to achieve the sustainable cooling based on the expertise of our team, but not only our team, but also our other team of UNDP, including the new launched Energy Hub of UNDP, to deliver this strategic plan. Should the countries are interested in the exploration of the opportunities in this regard, we're happy to support you. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaofeng. So I'm going to go quickly about to explain to you about some general concepts and findings of selected case studies while developing these cooling plans. And soon I'll pass the floor to Ms. Dima so she can provide you this information about the financial mechanisms and instruments that could be useful while you're trying to implement these cooling plans. So as we mentioned, we had this project in 2018 where we developed, we were selected by KSAP to support the 12 countries you see listed in this slide to develop their cooling plan. So it was a work that took, in many cases, between 3 to 4 years and in a high complex setting. When we think about the cooling plan, we need to place it under in terms of some complex policy framework that might be already addressing different parts of the chain of efficient coolings. For example, it's very common that countries have the national frameworks already in place that handles about the energy generation plans. And also many of the countries had the national action plans that establish strategies about mitigation and adaptation to climate change, for example, funded by the Global Environmental Facility. In the other side, we also have the Paris Agreement agreed in 2015, and the nationally determined the contribution, the NDCs, that in a way or another tackle energy efficiency through industrial sectors, for example. And some countries already started to identify and include in their NDCs the contribution of the cooling sector as a means to mitigate the effects of the climate change. This is the case, for example, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, in this region that was assisted by UNDP under their Climate Promise project. And finally, we have the framework of the Montreal Protocol through the HPMPs that indirectly we already know that contribute to a certain extent to energy efficiency, and the future framework of the KIPs that will make energy efficiency more latent and eligible, pending on how the discussions under the EXCON move forward. But it's also very common that these three frameworks, they may walk in parallel in a separate. And the risk that we face here is that they may never communicate between each other. And important to note that in many cases, these three frameworks may be dealt by different ministries or teams in the government, which also difficult the coordination of actions. So we believe that the National Cooling Plan could be the instrument that can link these strategies by drawing the information that is critical for the cooling efficiency sector from each one and providing an interlinked framework of actions and projects that could support the advance of energy efficiency in the cooling sector. While we developing the cooling plans, we basically had 3 routes that we could select. We could go through the energy focal points, we could go through the ozone focal points, or we could form a committee composed by these 2 people and more stakeholders that would work together with their starting points that would generate the national cooling plan. And this national cooling plan had the flexibility to be placed under different types of a policy framework, or if not at the level of a formal policy, as form of a guidelines, for example, for the sector, or a subset of a policy document, for example, Panama, that choose to put the cooling plan as part of their energy policy that goes until 2050, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, we faced challenges during the development of a cooling plan. The first one that Xiaofeng already mentioned is that there is no one-fits-all approach. We are different countries with different needs, so we need to have flexibility to apply different methodology that are required to meet the country needs. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the work should be disorganized. You know, the development should be something organized with clear guidelines on where you depart and where you want to go. We also learned that the more comprehensive the cooling plan is, the more complex it also to develop, because you need to engage more stakeholders. You need to extend the validation because you need to check if all the stakeholders agree with the strategies. And of course, depending on how you decide to place this as national policy, you also may need to go through more official endorsements to have it published. And one important thing that one thing that is important to mention is that we recommend that the terminologies and approaches and maybe indicators that we use in the cooling plan, they should be as aligned as possible with other multilateral environmental agreements terminology. So it would facilitate the placement and the collaboration between these policies. For example, if you want to use the cooling plan to place cooling under the NDC, so you might need to harmonize the way you speak as a sector, the terminology and the calculations and etc. For this presentation, we picked these 4 countries. The reason is because there is a diverse profile of countries in different geographic regions with different areas, different population, different level of implementation of cooling equipment. And this, when I looked this slide for the first time, it brought me to the attention how things are quickly changing from the implementation of the HPMPs to the Kigali Amendment. Because, for example, Ghana, Trinidad and Tobago is LVC by the definition of the HPMPs. But when you look here, considering the CO2 equivalent consumption of HFCs between Trinidad and Tobago and Ghana, you see that Trinidad and Tobago has 10 times more consumption of HCFCs in CO2 equivalent than Ghana has, minding that Ghana has 31 million people and Trinidad and Tobago has 1.4 million. So you can see how the cooling sector is relevant and how it contributes to the CO2 footprint in the Kigali Amendment for Trinidad and Tobago. And this also reflects today's strategies, for example, that Trinidad and Tobago needs to apply when strategizing over cooling efficiency. They need to work much more on mitigation strategies here than Ghana, because probably Ghana will have to will experiment a much faster future penetration of cooling systems. So they need to adapt themselves in the future so they avoid this consumption to grow, and also a huge demand that might increase their energy demand in the future. In terms of electricity demand, I'm not going to read detail per detail here because this slide is going to be provided to you later, but this is some information to show how is the importance, the relevance of the cooling sector and the energy demand of the countries. As you can see here, even with that relatively small consumption of HFCs in the cooling sector, still the cooling sector is responsible for almost 27% of the energy consumption in Ghana. In Nigeria, for example, this number is around 24 terawatts. In Lebanon, 6,000 gigawatts. And in Trinidad and Tobago, it's responsible for 17% of the total energy use. And then when we link this to the most, let's say, basic, the backbone of the policies for the energy efficiency, which are the minimum energy performance standards over the cooling equipment, you see, for example, that Ghana and Nigeria, though they have maps in place, these maps are already very old and don't reflect the level of technology that we have today and the efficiency that the equipment can reach today. So even if they are fully enforced, maybe they may not yield the same impact as a new and updated maps. While Lebanon and Trinidad and Tobago, as they don't have maps, they would still need to develop this map to start to work in this area, for example. So again, another finding in Ghana, for example, minding the expected increase that they project by 2050, this sector could be responsible by 13 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. Being that the larger share of this emission would come from the split AC subsector. In Nigeria, it is projected that the base of air conditioning will grow from 8 million installed units in 2020 to 71.4 million units by 2050. As a result of the increased access to energy that the country is experiencing today. As I mentioned, Lebanon doesn't have maps, so they identified that this is critical for the country to achieve their energy efficiency targets. And in Trinidad and Tobago also identifying that they require to improve the institutional capacities on cooling efficiency to remove first the barriers to the maps creation and deployment, but they also need to work in other types of policies. For example, the policies and energy subsidies that can distort the market and undervalue the energy efficiency programs that they may deploy in the future. This slide again, I'll trust you can read this later. That is very much information, but it's also a condensation of what we just spoke before about this status that we have in the country, in the countries that we study. But not less important, it's also to note that all action plans, not only of these 4 countries, but also the other 7 that developing cooling plans, the developed cooling plans, they also come attached with some proposed action plans to address the issue. So one common action plan in all cooling plans relates to the policy enhancement or policy creation. Mainly, for example, in Ghana, the plan is to enforce the maps and labeling systems that already exist. Nigeria plans to improve the maps, labeling, monitoring, verification, and enforcement system. Lebanon, of course, wants to develop the maps and the labeling systems in line with their safety standards for the refrigerants. And Trinidad and Tobago also is looking how to develop these policy instruments that also include maps, labels, but also minimum energy efficiency standards for buildings and public procurement strategies to support the market penetration of lower carbon equipment. In general, there is also the recognition of the need to diversify the funding and financial mechanisms in order to fully realize the action plans. but also there is a need to align many stakeholders that work in this sector and to improve institutional capacities and monitoring and enforcement mechanisms so you can achieve the targets of the cooling plans. So once these cooling plans are realized, the estimates is that all these countries could save up to 165 terawatts of energy. That would translate in 140 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. Overall, in terms of general expectations of for the implementation of these cooling plans is that, as I mentioned, all of them highlight the need for to seek and implement additional financial investments for cooling. And they also recognize there are market barriers that that need to be removed in order to achieve this. They concern about economics, legal, and technical barriers that they face. There is the need to develop and access innovative financial models that can provide the safety nets that can cover uncertainties and in lending the risks from the bank perspectives. This, for example, should mitigate the upfront capital expenditure risks that an investors all take into consideration when they go into this business. There is, of course, need for technical assistance, build capacities that go beyond the Montreal Protocol compliance on consumption, and that need to align these interventions with the energy policies. It's important to build on existing initiatives also. You need to depart somewhere, so we need to build from the partnerships that already exist in the governments with bilateral donors, with vertical funds, but we need to replicate and upscale the successful models interventions. So for example, upscale and replicating pilot and demonstration projects could be also a good starting point. And of course, there is a continued need to strengthen the work that has already been initiated with the private sector, academia, and civil society organizations, so we can multiply the environmental and social benefits that the efficient cooling can bring. Again, in terms of policy framework, we try to map a little bit what could be this potential intervention. So on the blank box, you see the standard type of interventions that are done through the Montreal Protocol. And on the blue, you see standard type of interventions that are done under a standard also energy efficiency policy. So on the Montreal Protocol, for example, we had established licensing and quota system that are centralized and that are very straightforward to control production and import of equipment and substances. And these are supported also by safety standards where we can make sure that types of refrigerants and equipment can be used in a safe and efficient manner. In the other side, we have the MAPs that are one of the most strongest and important energy policy to drive energy efficiency interventions. These are supported by energy audit certification and testing, but also by building code, so you can make sure that buildings are efficient and use the most efficient equipment. And in the blue side, one way to finance this scheme is using carbon credits that is linked to reduce GHG emissions in this cycle. But in the other side, for example, apart from the grants of the multilateral fund, we still don't have any stable sources of funding to support this cycle to happen. So one example that could be taken is a carbon pricing or a carbon tax scheme that, for example, is already done by Fiji, where by Fiji under the HPMP. Fiji today has a levy that charges a certain amount of money by kilo of HFC imported that helps the country in interventions related to Montreal Protocol. So if we could also think about schemes that charge a certain amount by CO2 equivalent tonnage of the high GWP equipment or gas that are imported, then you can have another revenue of funds that could support and link Kigali Amendment to the cooling efficient in a more stable and trustable manner. And of course, and then you could use these schemes to fully realize the purple boxes that are the potential tools that you can use to improve the efficiency in the cooling sector. As Saufang said, UNDP is ready to support. So we ourselves, we develop our sustainable cooling offer that aims to promote the sustainable cooling solutions through the programs and the projects that we have, but also linking the experience we have with diverse sources of funding. For example, we work with the MLF, the JEF, and other bilateral, private, and philanthropic donors to do this type of work. We have the team that is ready to provide the technical and financial support. In our work is strongly linked to the UNDP strategic plan that has this ambition to support energy access and energy efficiency for the developing world. But we also are repositioning ourselves internally so we can work more in integrated programs to support these complex integrated demands that we see in the cooling sector. Yeah, so thank you very much. And I would pass now to Dima so she can continue discussing a little bit on financial mechanism.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be with you in this event and to discuss about the importance of financial strategies and national cooling plans being key enablers for national cooling plans to achieve their ultimate objectives for a sustainable, efficient cooling sector. Please allow me to share with you the slides of my presentation. I would like to shed some lights on innovative financing models that has been implemented in several developing countries. And these models, they provided risk mitigation mechanisms and a blend of many funding options and addressed several challenges in developing countries, mainly how to engage the private sector, i.e. how to unlock private capital, how to address inclusion and efficient cooling, i.e. not leaving anyone behind without cooling equipments, how to de-risk and solicit funding at affordable interest rates. As we all know, in developing countries, the cost of funding is quite high due to the risk rating of these countries. And another challenge is how to introduce credit enhancement tools in order to improve the risk profile of energy efficiency projects. Another challenge is how to leverage finance schemes and expand the platform of capital. To start with the first model, it's energy saving insurance model. This model addresses the technology risk and provide guarantees for energy saving expected from energy investment in general or in cooling investments. The model involves a collaboration among insurance validation entities, among insurance companies and regulators and lenders. Successful implementation was conducted by BASE and UNEP in Morocco in February 2022 to mitigate this major technology risk barriers and to catalyze the investment in energy efficiency cooling. Another important model is the revolving loans model, which provide a quick credit line mainly to national development banks in order to also support the cooling sector And another good example is BASE and UNEP launched a revolving loan facility to Costa Rica for this purpose. CAAS cooling as a service, I consider it as an innovation. It's a groundbreaking innovation because it mainstream cooling as a service and at the same time provide affordable, sustainable cooling appliances for everyone, i.e. addressing the inclusion, the cooling inclusion issue. So this CAAS is a global effort. It's an initiative launched by KSAP, and it was the whole model involves the cooling service contract conducted between users and between the technology provider. The technology provider undertakes all operational expenses and acquire this equipment and do the maintenance, whereas the end user pay according to a pay-per-use model. Many examples of CAAS implementations, which were, I can name some, which was in India for installing agricultural cooling, and in Colombia for providing high efficiency centralized air conditioning. Just to give you and illustrate about one of the models which was applied in India, CAAS financial model, you can see in this model the technology provider selling equipment to the bank and then do a leaseback contract with the bank, leasing this equipment and providing them to the end users or customers based on usage, i.e. dollar per ton of refrigeration used. There is an mitigation instrument, which is usually guarantees provided from insurance company in order to provide coverage on payment guarantee in the event of any default. Another three important models which were implemented in several countries, and these are separate models, but they have something in common. They have they all target the consumer finance to facilitate the consumer, or for example the individuals or the households, to acquire climate-friendly air conditioning and refrigeration system through either a leasing agreement or through an on-wage or on-bill model. For the leasing model, there is a successful implementation in Rwanda, whereas the Business Development Fund initiated a co-lease initiative based on this model. For the on-wage and the on-bill models, it provides salaried customers to acquire efficient cooling. And it was also successfully implemented in several countries, whereas BASE and UNEP, for example, coordinated with the government of Ghana and Senegal, and another coordination between the government of Rwanda, BASE, and United for Efficiency. Another innovation is the ESCO model. ESCO model provides a holistic solution addressing operational, technology, and financial risks. Being a energy service providing company, the ESCO undertakes several range of services from design, implementation, maintenance, financing, and management, and valuation. So, usually the payment to ESCOs is contingent to an energy saving KPIs. Good examples are in India. Partial risk sharing facility was provided by the Development Bank in India to guarantee ESCOs to upscale the cooling manufacturing industry. In Indonesia, banks also financed ESCOs to also invest in efficient cooling. Usually ESCOs undertake two kinds of contracts, EPC contracts. One is the shared saving contract, whereas the ESCO undertake the procurement of the equipment and the financing and the operational risk of for any energy efficiency project. Another one is the guaranteed saving contract, EPC contract. Whereas the ESCO only provide guarantee, i.e. energy saving guarantee for the energy efficiency investment, whereas the client undertake the operational and the financial risk. Another mechanism which provides incentive, financing incentive for the reduction of GHG is the carbon credit. Carbon credit allows companies to replace old cooling equipment with the high GWP with new energy efficient equipment at low GWP. The only drawback of this mechanism is that the carbon payments are usually done post the verification of energy reduction, whereas the investment itself is paid upfront. However, still there is an opportunity to utilize this emission reduction purchasing contract as a collateral to access debt financing. UNCDF also is provided very innovative models by leveraging their investment platform and providing financial instruments to de-risk the financing of energy efficiency projects. UNCDP provide support for pipeline origination, for blended finance structuring, as I said, financial de-risking by providing guarantees and other instruments to catalyze the private investments and provide solutions, and also to support consumer finance. Usually UNCDF partners with UNDP, countries' national stakeholders, and asset management institutions to offer this blended finance solutions. Example is the International Municipal Investment Fund. This fund is usually is a partnership between UNCDF, the fund manager Meridian, and cities and local governments, UCLG. This fund started with euro $350 million in order to finance infrastructure projects and clean energy projects in cities and local governments. This diagram also provides an illustration of the interrelationship between the corporate investors, individual investors, donors, UNCDF, UCLG, and the asset management funds, and the ultimate investments in energy efficiency infrastructure projects. Another innovation is the NAMA facility. NAMA, it provides a facility whereas UNDP and UNCDF can access this facility, UNDP providing their technical assistance, their policy support, whereas UNCDF provide financial instruments to de-risk these investments in the form of loans, guarantees, and other mitigation instruments. NAMA is nationally appropriate mitigation actions. It's a partnership between donors represented by Denmark, by UK, European Commission, and CIFF. Example of a NAMA project is the Kenya NAMA project, which mainly targets cold chain service providers and and it addresses the issue of for reduction of methane emissions and the issue of harvest losses and food security. As we said, UNDP act as a technical support, and UNCDF provide concessional financial instruments like direct concessional loans, partial credit risk guarantees, and liquidity support facility. Finally, there is a new flagship initiated by UNDP within its finance sector hub and in partnership with the Sustainable Insurance Forum. This initiative is to also mainly to stress on integrating insurance and risk facility in government's financial and the government development projects that addresses climate change plans. And also it provides an expansion to the supply of inclusive insurance, i.e. providing insurance for all, for everyone, and to partner with governments to integrate sovereign risk mitigation in their development projects and to ensure natural capital. This slide brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd like to conclude with the following remarks. EE cooling and climate change financing solution cannot be a model that fits all. Whatever implemented in one developing countries might not be successful in another developing countries. Therefore, it's highly recommended that any financial scheme can be only optimized if tailored and customized based on the need of each country and based on the market specifics existing in these different countries. Finally, financial innovation is an ongoing need and process and is a key driver for national cooling plans to achieve their ultimate objectives. Thank you very much. I'm happy to receive any of your questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we are going to go through to our panel discussion. I would like to first call for Ms. Lara. And Lara, we know that the development of the cooling plan in Lebanon was a very challenging and lengthy process. So could you explain to us some of key findings on your experience when developing the cooling plan? So Lara, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's very unfortunate that we are not attending the OEWG with you in Bangkok. And good morning all the way from Lebanon. So in terms of your question, Anderson, I would like to highlight that the National Cooling Plan is definitely a useful instrument to achieving sustainable cooling to Lebanon and to other countries that are willing to prepare their national cooling plans. It's an effective action plan that tackles greenhouse gas and ODS emissions with coherent policies. The NCP includes several pathways for the transition to lower direct and indirect emissions through enforced energy efficiency requirement and the phase down of high global warming potential. I'm gonna go through or guide you through our national cooling plan, which included 5 main parts, which were first the market study, which aimed to better understand the stock appliances and their technical performance characteristics in Lebanon, proposal for maps, labels, regulation, a financing approach to support the introduction of energy efficient appliances, and the proposal of how to integrate the National Cooling Plan into Lebanon's NDC, National Determined Contributions, as well as a roadmap to transition to carbon neutrality in the cooling sector by 2050. In Lebanon, there were 2 major, I will say, like low-hanging fruits to reduce the country's emission and improve energy efficiency, which were the residential air conditioning, ACs, and the domestic refrigeration. So the main key finding is that the market study established was the first Lebanon's RAC greenhouse gas inventory And it helped us know the market and understand the market, which enabled the country to draw a comprehensive baseline in order to know how to set our standards, as well as to project the business as usual emissions and mitigation scenarios. So the RAC sector accounts for approximately 7.7 metric CO2 equivalent tons in annual greenhouse gas emissions. And this, under the business as usual, will increase to 10 metric CO2 tons by early 2030. However, with the transition to energy efficient and low global warming potential RAC appliances, the greenhouse gas emissions can be lowered by 2050 to 4.5 metric tons, and electricity demand to below than 5,000 gigawatt per hour. This assumes a constant combined grid emission factors with a transition to low global warming potential refrigerants, higher energy efficiency, and development of renewable energy target zero emissions. Also under the NCP, the greenhouse gas emissions are 53% lower than the business as usual. We are speaking in 2050. If we start implementing the National Cooling Plan, we will achieve a 53% lower greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. In order to achieve and implement the NCP recommends maps and labels regulation, as Anderson mentioned in his presentation, that Lebanon have no mandatory maps and labels regulation. So the NCP recommends establishment of maps performance standards according to EU regulations, establishment of labeling system, and development of testing procedures. And here I will really highlight on the development of testing procedure, because this will allow the current manufacturers in Lebanon to be able to test for their equipment. And Lebanon lacks a lab for RAC EE testing, and this will be a burden, and it will make the manufacturing in Lebanon, the manufacturing equipment in Lebanon, more expensive than the samples that are imported outside the country and that have already official accreditation foreign energy performance test. So in that terms, it's really important to make sure that once we are enforcing maps and labels regulation, to have testing procedures and energy efficiency RAC testing labs in Lebanon. One of the third elements that NCP Lebanon it was a main criteria for it was the funding and financial mechanism in order to support the intended market transformation towards energy efficiency and low global warming potential appliances targeted at the AC refrigeration focus sector. So the funding and financial mechanism refers to a consistent set of measures to accelerate the transition to low energy efficiency global warming potential appliances. The funding mechanism covers several elements, and the most important, where one of the key findings of the NCP are an import levy and imported appliances and refrigerants linked to energy efficiency and label cases of initially AC and refrigerators and the carbon content of refrigerants. An incentive mechanism to be provided based on carbon credits on the purchase of climate-friendly and efficient appliances linked to the return of old, inefficient cooling appliances sent to sound environmental disposal. And a financial mechanism that comes like soft loans, which act as a baseline and a credit program proposal, whereby soft loans are used to support the private sector investment, while the baseline and credit programs to cover the cost of a recycling and disposal facility. The NCP as well integrated into Lebanon's national determined contribution and supported the climate change projects in Lebanon under Paris Agreement, whereas climate-friendly and energy efficiency cooling can contribute with a mitigation effort to up to 4 metric tons CO2 equivalent, or about to 20% of Lebanon's greenhouse gas emissions. And the NCP recommended a roadmap to include recommendations for the integration of the NCP into sectoral measures of the NDCs covering energy, building, transport, industry, waste, and agriculture sectors. These are basically the key findings for the NCP for Lebanon, and we are eager to continue enforcement and implementing of the minimum energy performance standards in order.
We can hear you. Yes, if you want to conclude, yeah.
Yes. Excuse me. So I was saying that these are basically the key findings for Lebanon, and we are just waiting for the Council of Ministers approval. In Lebanon, in order to continue enforcing all our key findings in order to achieve our recommendations by 2030 and 2050 into zero carbon neutrality for Lebanon. And thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Specific took note of the ambitions of Lebanon to achieve the carbon neutrality in the cooling sector and the struggle that you are also having with the lack of testing facilities and procedures. Yeah, now, particularly that Lebanon identified that you rely very much on Europe, which makes things a little bit more expensive to you in terms of supply chain of equipment, right? So now I'll turn to Sri Lanka, to Mr. Rifa. So we know that the cooling plan of Sri Lanka is also a rather big and complex document, very in detail of analyzing the sector and very much linked to the HPMP. So what are the challenges and opportunities that you envisage when implementing the cooling plan in the coming years?
Thanks, Anderson. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of challenges, the cool chain industry of Sri Lanka is still growing and at the development stage, so it has more challenges. So despite the large production of perishable produce, the cold chain potential remains untapped in Sri Lanka mainly due to high initial capital investment for land, cold storages, auxiliary refrigeration facilities, the high cost of electricity, unavailability of manpower, skilled manpower, inefficient handling of perishables, and financing options are also affect the industries adversely. And Sri Lanka has a large number of cold storages for dairy, fisheries, poultry, but still there are some sectors are missing, like ripening chambers and pack houses. So those are largely missing. And when I come to the opportunities, this is a guideline. NCP is a guideline prepared for Sri Lanka. It is minimizing. It gives the opportunity to minimize cooling related energy demand via energy efficiency measures, low energy cooling technologies, and renewable energy-based applications, as well as it should it provides opportunity to reduce the ODS from refrigerants. And also it provides policy interventions to enhance use of renewable energy and technological and market transition to energy efficient, low GWP REC equipment, and also refrigerants. And the other one opportunities seems like research and development and identification of knowledge gaps. So the further researches are needed to explore technical and socioeconomic feasibility of different options of energy and also refrigerants. And the other one is identification of policy gaps, and also as mentioned, building of a capacity of technicians is also is important opportunity we find here on energy efficient alternatives and good refrigeration practices and minimizing energy loss. Also, with the crisis the Sri Lanka going on now, so the suitable cold chain to minimize the food loss is one opportunity from this NCP. And also we found opportunity for motivating or finding windows for using indigenous knowledge and research. So need to be learned from the history in designing energy efficient buildings by modern architectures, and also food preservation techniques using indigenous methods. Another one is enhancing cooperation between policymakers, civil society, and private sector is vastly important for this rapid transformation. So we are largely missing the end users. End users are also important part of the cool chain refrigeration use. By 2032, there will be 52% of the consumers are covered with refrigeration. So that is also mainly important a window we see from here. And also safety and energy efficiency standard for proper handling of flammable or toxic refrigerants. So we don't have a standard for the time being. We now being prepared the standard after this. And also if you see the projections shows that active intervention can reduce cooling energy requirement by 5 to 12% during the year 2032 to 2033 for dairy, fisheries, and poultry over the current baseline. However, in the retail sector, it would be around 10 to 15% during the same period. So additionally, there are different ongoing policies and programs related to cooling, and also overarching policies and thrust area of development objectives. So the NCP lays a cooling demand estimate for our cooling demand is going up to 18 years, up to 2038. So the cross-cutting integrated policies should be developed with this to secure benefits and meet development needs. So the other area is a policy framework that supports incentivize the industry involvement is also identified and captured from this NCP towards sustainable cooling. So with this, Sri Lanka is preparing NCP. I see NCP here is a national cooling policy. So national cooling policy is being prepared. It's already been drafted, and we waited for the consent from all the stakeholders, because number of stakeholders identified. There were 45 odd stakeholders, because this plan could not be done without the cross-sectional intervention from stakeholders. We had to get all these consent, and also we had to go for cabinet ministers' approval to come up with this cooling policy. It goes up to 2045 during the Kigali Amendment implementation period. So these are the main challenge opportunities. So mainly this all should lead to meet the targets of Montreal Protocol at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that you mentioned the need to use indigenous solutions, right? Because there is a long knowledge about maintaining cooling, particularly in a country like Sri Lanka in the hot zone, and also the issue about waste and food loss, because there is a preoccupation, is one of the preoccupations, modern preoccupation, let's say, to reduce food loss, also to reduce the big problem of waste generation that you have. So it will eventually increase the demand for energy in the country. So with this, then I turn to Nigeria. So Mr. Idris, we know that Nigeria was one of the countries that had developed the cooling plan at last, and by this you also had the opportunity to also follow a little bit more the discussions of the Montreal Protocol and the policies that could impact the strategy of Nigeria. So how you see the synergies between the Montreal Protocol commitment and the efficient cooling efficiency strategy when Nigeria delivers the cooling plan actions in this case?
Good afternoon, all. And thank you for that very important questions. If you, from the questions, you're looking at how do I, in terms of synergy with other relevant stakeholders to implement the Kigali Amendment. Basically, that's where I look at the question. Yeah, I'm working in the ozone office now for the past 20 years, 2001. So, and implementation of this Kigali Amendment, which is a new challenge, I will use my experience in implementing it. Basically, when implementing projects, project document is developed with collaboration of the Ozone Office by the implementing partners. The activities under the project documents will determine the stakeholders and will determine the objective of the project. In our own case, we are lucky, and I use this opportunity to thank KSEP now, Clean Cooling Collaborative and UNDP for providing support for us, for Nigeria, to put in place a national cooling plan, while the implementation of the Kigali Amendment. The national cooling plan basically is how to enhance the energy efficiency of refrigeration and air condition equipment alongside the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons. So when the project was approved, it came out with two windows. That is the integration of energy efficiency in the refrigeration and air condition servicing sector. Basically, immediately what comes to my mind with the workshops I used to attend, what comes into my mind when there's integration of energy efficiency mainly is how to reduce direct emission. And when you talk about direct emission, you are talking about the servicing sector. Knowing that, you now know that in the implementation of the national cooling plan, you know the servicing technicians have to be trained on how to improve energy efficiency of serviced refrigeration and air condition equipment, which will in turn lead to reduction of energy consumption. So you know that particularly the technicians are very important stakeholders. Then the other barrier is transforming the market of inefficient RAG equipment. If you hearing the window or the topic, if you say transforming inefficient, you know that the energy part of it. How do you improve the energy? How do you enhance energy efficiency of RAG equipment in the form of reducing the indirect emissions? So with this, you know that you are now talking of putting in place the necessary standards, standards and awareness to facing more energy efficient equipment. So once that comes to my mind, you know that, okay, you need the standard organization, that is the people that are involved in putting in place standards. Then awareness, to create awareness, you know that, yes, for example, in my country, we have National Orientation Agency. You know, you need the organization to help you in the awareness. So after identifying these key, very important stakeholders, I invited them for a meeting where I introduced an inception meeting where I presented the KSEP funding for improvement of energy efficiency while implementing the Kigali Amendment. Then I formed a working group committee with them. Then when they know that, yes, they know that a project is coming, and let them know the major agency, I'm not coming to take your job. I'm just particular about the cooling aspect. Like the Energy Commission, I told them that is the cooling aspect. I'm particularly focusing on how to improve energy efficiency because of the threat of climate change. Then I let them know that I'm not interested in the household equipment, like the bulbs and all those things. That's your job. Then the climate change unit, because HFC is more or less a climate change issue. So I got involved with them to see that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what we're going to do, in saying that I'm even helping you, because each country is supposed to come up with NDC. And the cooling sector provides us with a unique opportunity of fast mitigation action because of the high global warming potentials of HFCs. So indirectly, I'm really helping you as to meet your binding commitment under the Paris Agreement. So recognizing that, I will work with them in developing of the national cooling plan, and with the international consultants that carry out the training of some selected technicians on how to improve energy efficiency of service equipment. Then they put in place the minimum energy performance standards. Then we have a national action plan that we invited key stakeholders for validation of the national action plan for 2 days validation. We went through the document page by page. It was validated. So what we need to do, working with them, then we came up with a implementation plan from the national cooling plan. What we need to implement, and with timeline, both short, medium, and long term. So the cooling plan has been validated. What remains now, it will be integrated into the NDC. So far, that's the way I work out my synergy with relevant stakeholder. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Idris, for highlighting these challenges. We know that have been very challenging for Nigeria, especially that they have clear roles between the Energy Commission and the Climate Change Unit. But it's important that you mentioned that this is directly linked to the implementation of the Kigali Amendment, right? So that is important that it started also from your unit, so you could be the one tying these knots between the different institutions. So finally, I pass to Casper, and Casper, we know that district cooling is a good and can yield high amounts of energy efficiency depending on the setting and the technology that you are using. And it's increasingly being, accepted and adopted by countries. So what do you think that needs to be done to unlock the full potential of district cooling by developing countries, specifically in this setting of the cooling plants?
Thank you very much, Anderson. I think this is an important question. So, like you said, district cooling should be considered the high standard for what can be achieved in terms of mitigation potential on both direct and indirect emissions in the cooling sector. It's a proven concept, but with limited market penetration in many Article 5 countries. There are many economical and environmental benefits from district cooling. Besides the energy efficiency, it can also help to manage the peak loads of the electricity demand, facilitate the introduction of renewable energy to the electricity grid, as the excess energy can be used to produce cold water and ice in cold storage during the low peak hours. It can delay new investments in electricity generation capacity due to offloading of electricity demand during the high peak hours. So why is it not happening by itself in Article 5 countries? The capital investments for district cooling are high, but the operating costs are low. It often requires a different legal and operational structure, and will require a lot of coordination among the potential participants in the district. This is complex and requires a lot of support and technical assistance in the first phases. This experience is often not present in many Article 5 countries. UNDP believe that we can provide important support in the raising of awareness about the benefits and provide strong technical support to develop new districts. UNDP has in several countries, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean, developed business case and pre-feasibility studies with funding from different sources that have confirmed this promising potential. We are promoting a bottom-up approach to district cooling, where the focus is on the identification of small and simple district cooling projects with a strong business model behind it. The assumption is that a decentralized approach is the most cost-effective way to introduce district cooling, which brings confidence to local stakeholders in the value chain. Smaller districts can be joined and combined to larger districts over time. So far, our focus has been on the SIDS. I think the main challenge has been to mobilize funding for the pre-investment phases, which is a critical phase in the development of bankable projects. Our experience has shown that once investment projects have been fully developed and the agreements have been made among the stakeholders, then it's possible to access the necessary findings. Banks are willing to come in. We're currently working on the construction of 2 small districts in Trinidad and Tobago with support from the Global Environmental Facility. So in UNDP, we are convinced that district cooling will play an important role in the future, as it has the huge potential, but it will not happen by itself. So the external support is needed in order to make it happen. Thank you very much, Andersen.
Thank you, Casper, particularly highlighting these challenges and the possibilities of the cooling plan. As you mentioned, that our experience also shows that there is also this misconception that we need require large investments up front. And many times is actually the investment is not so big if you plan well, when you are able to upscale this later with the cascade investments that also can come later. So I'll now open the floor for the questions and answers. And I see Roberto already nodding there. So maybe I could bring Roberto Peixoto to the first spot. He's a co-chair of the TIAP and having a big role on this energy efficiency discussion. So Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anderson. Well, first, I would like to thank you, UNDP, for giving me the opportunity to be involved in the National Cooling Action Plan or National Cooling Plan for some countries. It has been very exciting and important work and challenge. I think the most important things about the National Cooling Plans have been said here. And it is an evolution of the Montreal Protocol tools in order to have a sustainable refrigeration and air conditioning sector. I think we are all aware about the importance of the refrigeration and air conditioning sector in the world today in terms of well-being, food preservation, avoiding food loss and food waste, and of course the energy consumption. The National Cooling Plan, I think it is an effort very important that the countries have developed in order to integrate several plans or subsector plans, not only environmental energy, but also economic and social areas. So this is one very good achievement. I think it was an opportunity for certain countries to make also the link with the other areas that traditionally the Montreal Protocol didn't talk. For instance, the energy area or other areas like economic and social areas. So one could say that, okay, national cooling plans, we had the CFC phase out plans, we had the HPMEP, but the national national cooling plans, they go beyond and they make the links that are needed today for having this systemic approach. My personal experience and was very good and important also for the work in the RTOC and the TIP, and to disseminate information and experience that have been developed in certain countries. National cooling plans are today a very good source and reference that have been used in task force reports, mailing the energy efficiency reports. And finally, I think it is an opportunity, has been an opportunity for the countries to integrate, as I said before, to other important areas. So I think it is important to continue and to intensify efforts to have this systemic approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Roberto, and sorry for putting you in the spot as a first commentator. So I don't know, the floor is open, so please, we also have Lara and Dima online if you want to make questions to her. But we are also, as I mentioned, we are also open through Spark Blue to receive further follow-up questions and consultations after you are able to access the full presentations that we are going to post soon there. So yeah. Yeah, so we're probably tired already from the heavy morning. So I'll pass the floor back to Xiaofeng so she can say some closing words.
I think, I suppose there will be some questions regarding the financial model because this community was not familiar with those financial model in our work in the past, but maybe if we want to go to the energy efficiency program, it's kind of, something we need to learn, from those existing models and also consider whether it will be applicable in your countries, if you are interested to do something regarding to the energy efficiency. I just want to say, the panelists here, they are kind of inspire me, we actually just put a little bit of money resources, not too much, from KSAP to us to develop those cooling plans. But the achievement is really beyond, this plantation from the beginning. It's really they coordinate the stakeholders in the countries, to learn and do the survey, do the analysis, and to learn to each other, talk to each other, and then come up with some kind of plan. Also make it happen that the government approves the publication of the plans, as a resource for the public to look at. I think that's kind of achievement. I think that's exercise is very helpful for everyone involved in this exercise. But I also want to say those implementation, if you look at those cooling plans, a lot of information and also the challenges how to implement this cooling plan, a lot of demand on the finance resources, from whatever, who can provide. But I think that's we generated some kind of opportunities, some kind of, platform, and people could work together for something, really meaningful. I think not only for the climate, it's also very meaningful for the country themselves, for the sustainable development. This energy efficiency is something you can sell to your country, to your government, to your stakeholder, because everyone will benefit if we can, move forward those energy efficiency and sustainable cooling, those coupled system, could really deliver. So thank you very much. I think there's a lot of things we can do in the future. We really look forward to work with all of you, as moving forward for the integrated, solution for cooling. Thank you very much.
Just to pause the script, I see the hands of Mazen up. So Mazen, thank you very much. We're very happy that you could join us virtually. So maybe it's the perfect one to close for us also the contact group. Mazen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anderson, and good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I have two questions. My first question goes to my friends from Sri Lanka and Nigeria regarding the maps. During the preparation of the NCP, did you take into consideration doing a voluntary maps and labeling system as a start for the first year or for a couple of years? Because we in Lebanon, we have set our goals in terms of a voluntary maps and standards at the start, so that we can have the taste of the local manufacturers and the importation of refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, so that we can move forward with developing our maps. This is my first question. My second question goes to Dima, where I found her presentation very rich, and we can, I think there is doors open for funding projects for energy efficiency in cooling and refrigeration. I don't know if UNDP, Anderson can play a role where they can reach out with those funding agencies or banks or international funding resources, where we can develop some of the projects here in Lebanon or other countries, mainly Article 5 countries. Thank you.
So maybe I pass the floor first to Sri Lanka, then Nigeria, and then lastly to Dima to respond.
Thanks for the questions. Sri Lanka, as I already mentioned, there are a number of stakeholders we have. So as you suggested, it's working with developing maps. So you consider to develop maps to get all the stakeholders on track. So that would be useful. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that question. As I earlier mentioned, so when the project was approved for Nigeria, we look at what is the existing situation in terms of development of the maps and the labeling. We find out that there was an already existing map for Nigeria, not only for Nigeria, but for the West African region. So we work with we find out what is the problem hindering the enforcement of these minimum energy performance standards, with a view of trying to address the problem. It was incorporated into the National Cooling Action Plan, and stakeholders suggested strategies on how to implement the minimum energy performance standards. It was already developed by the relevant authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Idris. Dima, can you take the last question about financing?
Yes, concerning the financing and how UNDP can play important role in soliciting financial solution or funding resources for projects in Article 5 countries, I suggest that the countries should indicate or provide with an identification of projects that are of priority to the country, and after assessing the needs of the country and the whole parameters of the financial landscape, the economic and socio conditions, and the impact of these projects in climate change solutions. So, my recommendation is to start with indicating main projects for these countries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see something in the chat. I don't know if it is a question or no. I know a question. Okay, so yes, I think so. This is all. No more hands. So I think now we can proceed to the final closure. And thank you very much for your time, and I hope that it was useful. And as we mentioned, now this information will be posted in our Spark Blue, and we invite you to visit, and also soon download the cooling plan publication that we are going to launch there in the page. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.